Hello everyone, Calamity here, definitely not trying to record this for the 15th time. Today we're talking about Hu Tao, who's having her next rerun in the next couple of days. It's actually been over a year since her last rerun, believe it or not. And today we're going to talk about everything you need to know before you decide to pull for her or not. Now before we start, something I should say is that hey, if you like Hu Tao because you think she's really cute, you like her playstyle, you just want to pull for her because you want to pull for her, go for it. This video is just designed to help newer players decide that, if you're on the fence whether or not she's worth pulling or not. And like I said, I'm just going to go over everything, sort of a general overview. And let's start with the talents. Actually, before we start, quick shout out to Relvant for letting me borrow his account. He has min-maxed the crap out of his Hu Tao. You can see he's triple crowned, has the signature weapon, and even C1, but we'll talk all about that later. Let's just go into the talents. First up, we have her normal attack talent, which on paper is pretty standard. There's nothing unique about it at all. It's, normal attack, 6 consecutive spear strikes. Her charge attack is very similar to other pole arm users. She'll do that little, lunge forward and spin. Plunging attack, pretty normal. If you look at the multipliers, all normal stuff here and there. But do keep note that her charge attack does have the highest damage multiplier. Next up, if we look at the elemental skill, this is where things start to get a little bit more interesting. So she will enter the Paramita Papilio state. I don't know how to say that properly, I'm sorry. So we'll just call it the Papilio state. Basically, when you activate her skill, she's going to lose a bunch of HP, first of all, and then it's going to increase her attack based off her max HP. So with that vital information you just learned, yes, you do want to build HP on your Hu Tao. In fact, she has one of the lowest base attacks compared to other DPSs in the game, but she makes up for it with this elemental skill that just gives her a straight up huge boost in attack. Now, this bonus cannot exceed 400% of Hu Tao's base attack, and do not worry about this limit. It is fine. You don't have to worry about like, oh, I might, go over the limit. Don't worry about it. It's fine. When you enter the Papilio state, 3 things happen. First of all, your attacks are going to be converted into pyro damage. This means that if you decide to use her for whatever reason with Candace or Changyun, you don't have to worry about her attacks being converted. Second, her charge attacks are now going to apply a Blood Blossom. There's more information on that down below, which we'll get to when we get there. The last effect is that Hu Tao will get increased resistance to interruption. Now, this is nice to have if you don't have a shielder, but the common strat with Hu Tao is to use her with a shielder, which gives you a lot of resistance to interruption anyway. So, lastly, the Blood Blossom is what happens when you charge attack an enemy while in the Papilio state. You'll basically do damage over time, pyro damage that is, every 4 seconds. And this damage is considered elemental skill damage. You can reapply the Blood Blossom to an enemy every time you charge attack them, which is why you're going to be spamming Hu Tao's charge attacks. That's basically her playstyle, is to spam those charge attacks, get those Blood Blossoms, and do as much damage as you can. Also, keep a note, when you do enter the Papilio state, do not top off of Hu Tao, at least until it ends, because it will immediately end that effect, and you're going to have to wait for the whole cooldown to use it again. Just take a quick gander at the skill attributes, just so you can see that you do lose 30% of your current HP, not your max. Something to keep in mind there. You will get a huge increase in attack based off your max HP. You can see the Blood Blossoms do it's a pretty, decent damage. Most of the damage actually comes from the charge attack itself, because it has a higher damage multiplier, and you're going to be vaporizing that for even more damage. It does have a duration of 9 seconds and a cooldown of 16. Let's move on to the burst. So you're going to command a Blazing Spirit to attack, dealing pyro damage in a large AoE. The more enemies you hit, the more healing you get, up to 5 times on Hu Tao. So this is nice. This is a nice burst of damage as well as healing, depending on how many enemies are nearby. The way that I like to use this and the way it's commonly used, Spirit Soother is more of like a combo finisher or like a combo ender. So when you activate her skill, you're going to be doing those charge attacks, right? And as you're doing attacks, you're actually going to be losing HP. Right before the skill ends, you want to pop your burst if you have it for big damage. Now, something that I forgot to mention is that if you are equal to or below 50% HP, the amount of damage and healing that you do will be increased. As you can see, there's a huge difference. Again, this is crown, so keep in mind those really high skill multipliers. Skill damage here, if not below 50% HP, is just 494%, which is actually really good already. But it goes up to 617 if you're at low HP, which is really easy to do with Hu Tao. Really easy. Has a very low cooldown and an energy cost of 60. Something to keep note is that you really don't need that much energy recharge when building Hu Tao. She will definitely get this burst pretty frequently, so you don't have to worry about it too much, letting you focus more on those damage stats. Let's move on to the passive talents next. So we have Flutter By, which after the Papilio state ends, or if you swap off Hu Tao, everyone in your team, excluding Hu Tao, will have their crit rate increased by 12% for 8 seconds. Nice little buff to your sub DPSs, but another benefit to this buff is that if you're using any support with a Favonius weapon, Favonius Lance, Favonius Warbow, Favonius Sword, that's just going to help them proc their weapon effect and gain more energy, you know, for your sub DPS's burst needs. Or energy needs, I should say. Next we have the Sanguine Rouge. Basically, when your HP is less than half, you will have a pyro damage bonus of 33%. So you always want to keep Hu Tao at a low HP, or at least less than half HP. And you can counter the risk of being low HP if it makes you worry, you know, about like fighting a boss or something, by just having a shield for the most part. However, if you are fighting against Rift Hounds, Hu Tao might not be the best option. And then her last talent is called the More the Merrier, and this is just a cooking talent, not interesting. When you cook a perfect dish, you have a chance of getting a suspicious one, which are the bad versions of a dish. Moving on to the weapon. Now, obviously, like I said, this character has been built heavily, so we have the Staff of Homa here, which is her signature weapon, and I'm sure this is a weapon you've heard multiple people say is an amazing weapon, not just for Hu Tao, but just characters in general. It's going to straight up increase her HP by 20% and give her an attack bonus based off her max HP, which is insane. So just tons and tons of damage here. A good alternative is a Dragon's Bane. This is a 4-star weapon, which is arguably her best 4-star weapon. It gives you a ton of elemental mastery, which is a good stat for Hu Tao since she's constantly vaporizing her damage. You can easily refinement 5 this to get the most out of the weapon's effect, since your enemies will definitely be affected by Pyro and Hydro all the time, or at least they should be. Thanks to the Blood Blossom, or if you're using Jingcho, you know, the swords, also applying Hydro. If you want to go really, really cheap and you're like really, really new, one weapon I can quickly recommend is a Black Tassel, just because it gives you HP percent. This is a nice starter weapon. Definitely want to, you know, upgrade to a 4-star like a Dragon's Bane. I highly recommend the Dragon's Bane again, just because it is a fairly common 4-star weapon. You see it a lot on not just weapon banners, but you'll actually probably end up pulling some yourself, just, you know, normally pulling for characters or artifacts. Let's talk about this real fast. The best artifact set for Hu Tao is going to be a Crimson Witch of Flames. However, if you are a bit on the lazier side to farm the effect or the artifacts, or you just, you know, you don't have access to the artifact set for some reason, you can do a Gladiator's Destiny for now as a placeholder. Another set you could also do is the Shimenawa's Reminiscence, which gives you 50% boost to your charge attacks, but at the cost of your burst uptime. But at the end of the day, you should definitely try to opt in for Crimson Witch, as it increases your pyro damage, increases your vaporized damage. When looking at substats, we want mostly the usual, you know, round of substats here for a main DPS. So crit rate, crit damage. Elemental Mastery has a high priority here because, again, we're doing vaporize a lot. The third best substat you can get is HP percent. Usually that'd be a waste on, well, non-HP scaling characters or DPS characters in general, but for Hu Tao, HP means more damage, so getting HP percent is fantastic. So when it comes to your Sands, you can opt in for an HP percent Sands, and that's actually going to be a lot of damage for you. You can also opt in for an Elemental Mastery Sands if you feel like you're lacking in some Elemental Mastery. For the Goblet, of course, we want the Pyro Damage Goblet. If you are struggling to get one, again, you could also go for a Elemental Mastery one, at least until you get a Pyro Damage one later on. For the Circlet, also crit damage or crit rate, just, you know, pick the one that you have less of, and As I mentioned before, getting some attack, either if it's percentage or flat, like that's okay. You know, it's better than rolling defense. And for energy recharge, you could use some, but you don't need to heavily invest in energy recharge as you would with other characters. Alright, this is going to be probably the hot topic of this video, and that's going to be Hu Tao's Constellations, which have a lot of debate. Now, a lot of Hu Tao players out there would probably recommend getting C1 for Hu Tao. And now let's quickly go over what this does. When you use her elemental skill, your charge attacks do not consume stamina. Now, for anyone that's ever used, you know, any melee character and you spam those charge attacks, you probably see how quickly you drain your stamina, right? Now you can probably see how valuable this constellation is. However, if you are at C0, there is some tech you can do to save on stamina. We'll go over that later on in the combat demo. But this is a really debatable thing. Like, I do see why people prefer having a C1 on Hu Tao, and I can also understand why some people say it's also okay for just Hu Tao to be at C0. I can't decide this for you. Only you can decide this for yourself. So you definitely need to try Hu Tao before you pull, in the character trial at least. Because I'll show you the tech, I'll show you the animation canceling you'll have to do, you know, to conserve your stamina so you can do the most damage with Hu Tao. But if that's something you don't like doing, or you feel, you know, awful, or it's not fun to do for you, then Hu Tao might not be for the character for you, and that's understandable. We're going to quickly go over the rest of the constellations as well real fast, but, you know, overall, basically, they just, you know, mean more damage. So we have Ominous Rainfall, which is her C2. This makes your Blood Blossoms do additional damage based off your Hu Tao's max HP, and it will also add your Burst, the ability to add Blood Blossoms to any enemies it hits. Really nice constellation there. C3, C5, we already know, adds +3 to skill and burst, which is actually going to be pretty nice damage boost for Hu Tao. C4 is going to add another similar buff, but this one is applied to your Blood Blossom. So when you defeat an enemy that has a Blood Blossom, everyone in your team except Hu Tao will get a crit rate damage increase, crit rate increase of 12% for 15 seconds. This will stack with her other passive talent that gives also more crit rate when her Papilio state ends. So again, synergy with Favonius weapons, synergy with your sub DPS is just having more consistent crits. Really nice constellation there. Her C6 is probably the most unique or interesting one out of this bunch here. Basically, it's a life insurance policy. If you would take a hit that gets you to really low HP, which is less than 25%, or a straight up hit that would have killed you, you won't die. It's a get out of death free card that can be used once every 60 seconds. Additionally, however, your physical and elemental resistance will be increased by 200%, and your crit rate will also be increased by 100%, and you also get a greatly reduced resistance interruption. Now, this is basically for very niche specific Hu Tao teams, like the Hu Tao and Ayaka setup that you might have heard about. This is how Hu Tao does her quote-unquote her nuke damage setups that you've probably seen on YouTube thumbnails and clickbaits where they're like, Hu Tao did 1,000,000 damage? You know, it's most likely they did the burst with some sort of melt or vaporized setup, and it did a ton of damage because of the 100% crit rate that you're getting from this constellation. You can go ham on crit damage, literally just everything in crit damage, get your HP low, do her burst, and do a ton of damage. That's basically how this constellation works. But it's also a Wales, that's a Wales territory right there. That's not for us free to play or low spenders. We're not really gonna ever see that constellation or ever try it out. But just something I thought I'd add to the video. Alright, now before we actually fight stuff, I don't usually include this in videos, but because, again, Hu Tao is a special case, you do need to learn some basic animation canceling and some of her basic combos. It's pretty easy, you know, compared to other characters that are combo heavy, like Eula, for example. So all you're going to do is do a normal attack into a charge attack and jump cancel. If you're at C0, you have to jump cancel. If you're at C1, like this account is on, then you have the luxury of using a dash cancel. So this is basically what it looks like. These are her normal attacks, right? You only want to do one. Just one charge, like that, and then you're gonna jump as soon as you start seeing her spin and apply the damage, and you want to cancel it to conserve your stamina. So if you're at C0, your combos are going to look like this when you're fighting, you know, anything. I did that one too early, but that one was good. This is good. So it looks like that. And you can see I'm spamming these charge attacks, but my stamina is actually pretty good, right? Like I spammed a bunch and I only used up half my stamina. So I'm showing it a couple more times. But yeah, that's basically the combo you want to use if you're at C0, because you don't have the luxury of dash canceling. You know, and then if you are at C1, here's what your combo looks like. It's the same combo, but you just dash instead of jump. That's literally the difference. Now, the reason we're dash canceling or jump canceling is for two reasons. The first one being, just look at the charge attack. Let's say you're fighting a stationary enemy and you just dash yourself way past it. You know, you have to readjust yourself or you position yourself. That wastes time. You have only 9 seconds in Hu Tao's elemental skill. So you want to make the most out of it by doing as much damage as you can. There is another combo you can do. And I only recommend doing this if you're low on stamina for whatever reason. Like, let's say you're fighting an enemy that you've had to chase a lot, or you've had to... Sorry. If you've had to dodge a lot, maybe your stamina's low. So instead of doing the one normal attack into charge, you do 3 normal attacks into charge. That's it. It's not that complicated. I promise you. If this does feel complicating or too much for you, please try to practice it in like the character trial at the very least to see if you're gonna like it. So if you're low on stamina, you do 1, 2, 3, charge, and then either jump or dash cancel depending on your constellation. So we'll just do like that. That's less damage overall, but it's nicer on your stamina bar. Something I want to talk about is team setups before we do a combat demonstration. These days, it's more popular to run 2 Hydro characters with Hu Tao. Now, usually those 2 Hydro characters are Xingqiu and like Yelan, with Zhongli for shields. However, this account doesn't have Yelan, unfortunately, but there are other alternatives you can use. For example, Mona, also a good option. And the reason you want 2 Hydros on your team is because of the Soothing Water Hydro Resonance that got changed recently. Hydro Resonance got changed, basically. So it increases your HP by 25%. I made a video on how popular or how good this is and how a lot of people aren't playing around it or noticing it. This is basically more damage for Hu Tao, which is really, really great. So you want to run double Hydro. Anybody if you can, even if a Kokomi. Now, I know a lot of Hu Tao mains just went, whoa, why would you do Kokomi? You don't want to heal Hu Tao. Again, you just want someone that can be on the team, the Hydro Resonance, and if you are exploring, having a healer is always nice, right? But you don't have to, but it's just an option if you don't have like Yelan or another Hydro character. Like even Barbara is also an okay. You just want to get that Hydro Resonance. Alright, for our combat demo, I am going to fight Child. And you guys can see how strong Hu Tao is. I messed up that cancel. That's okay. We're gonna get Xingqiu's burst back. We apply our shield. And then we go again. I'm doing jump canceling so you can see what it looks like at C0. I don't want to do dash canceling. But as you can see, really, really fast damage. And you can see the Blood Blossom, hopefully, effect. Let's get Xingqiu's burst again. And this is where C1 comes in handy, by the way. If you have to constantly chase an enemy like this, it can be really annoying. I'm gonna just reapply the shield and go with Hu Tao again. You can see we're basically chunking this boss to death. Alright, that's gonna bring us to the end of the video. Hopefully you learned something about Hu Tao, and this video is at least helpful in, you know, helping you decide if she's worth your primogems or not. Hu Tao is just one of those characters that's, once she was entered the meta, she never quite left. These days though, she's just sharing the spotlight with other, you know, other people these days because of all the fancy new Dendro teams, but Hu Tao hasn't been power crept at all. She's still Very, very strong. One of the strongest teams in the game. Very popular. Also used quite frequently. And like I mentioned before, she's only been getting buffs. Yulan being introduced to the game is a buff for Hu Tao. The Hydro Resonance change is a buff for Hu Tao. She's only gotten stronger, not weaker. With that being said, if you can get around the whole like having to animation cancel your charge attacks, Hu Tao becomes an insanely powerful DPS for both crowds of enemies as well as single target. Because you spam those charge attacks you saw on Child, we were chunking his HP. Now I know Child isn't probably the tankiest boss these days, but I feel like it was an okay demonstration. Hu Tao is also really simple. If you like characters that are stable and don't have a lot of builds, Hu Tao is a great character to pull for. Like Ganyu can be built for a freeze team or a melt team, right? But Hu Tao, mainly she's just built for vaporize, and she usually has the same teammates or some sort of variation of teammates. And that's just what works with her. I'm sure there might be some weird Hu Tao overloaded or maybe even Hu Tao Burgeon shenanigans out there, but for the most part, Hu Tao does great with vaporize. It's been solid ever since her release, and it continues to be solid even in the current Spiral Abyss today. Yeah, Hu Tao's just been a very, very strong main Pyro DPS character and continues to be, you know, probably arguably the best Pyro damage character in the game. Obviously, some people have their preferences and playstyles and stuff, but Hu Tao is solid. And if you're looking for a solid main DPS for your team that can do everything, or, you know, mostly everything, Hu Tao is your gal. The only thing I would say to be careful around is the Rift Hounds, since they can chew through shields, especially if you're going against a lot of them, or like the Golden Wolf Lord. You can counter this by bringing a Hydro healer like Kokomi or Barbara, so that, you know, Hu Tao just doesn't straight up die if you're relying only on Zhongli for heals. And you still get to keep your Hydro Resonance buff. But other than that, Hu Tao shreds basically everything in this game. If there's anything you feel like I missed, feel free to leave a comment down below, or if you have any other questions that I didn't cover, let me know. With that being said, thank you so much for watching. Subscribe if you like the content, and I'll see you in the next one.